Good to see everyone. It has been a long while for me to see so many people coming to this room for our seminar. I'm the director of Asia Global Institute, KYTAN. I'm also a professor in the business school here at Hong Kong U. So 2 years ago, we started a public policy webinar, and it has become very successful. But I also become very tired because I myself participate in a lot of webinars myself, and I realized that the audience actually enjoy face-to-face interaction more than checking into a Zoom room and listen to a person talking to a screen. So today I'm very happy to have our first in-person policy seminar at the Asia Global Institute, and we'll continue to run this seminar at least once a month, if not more. And I'm very glad to introduce my new friend from Singapore, Professor Yeung, from the National University of Singapore. He's a distinguished professor at the NUS, and he actually spent quite a lot of time in Hong Kong. You just told me you grew up in Hong Kong, right? Went to a famous high school called DBS. But since then, he went to Singapore for college and continued to be there until today. So Professor Yeung is a professor of economic geography at NUS, the first geographer based in Asia to receive both the 2018 American Association of Geographers Distinguished Scholarship Honors and the United Kingdom's Royal Geographical Society Murchison Award in 2017. In November 2022, it was conferred the 2022 Sir Peter Hall Award for Lifetime Contribution to the field by the Regional Studies Association in London. I can go in and on. He's an expert on global production chains. He's one of the founder of this research area, which used to be called global supply chains or global value chains, and now we all start using a new term called global production networks. In a recent book which he wrote during the pandemic, published by Stanford University Press, he wrote several chapters on the restructuring of supply chains, especially in the electronic industry, together with semiconductors. So today, we're very happy to have him here to speak for 40 minutes about his research and his views about the new regionalization of global trade and how the supply chains have evolved due to geopolitics, due to the pandemic, and obviously due to also new technologies that have been deployed in understanding and managing supply chains. And then there will be a Q&A session after Professor Yeung's presentation. So for the first 40 minutes, I understand that he has prepared some PowerPoints for us. Let us welcome Professor Yeung.
Right. Thank you very much. Yeah, hope you can hear me well. And thank you to Hei for a very, very kind and generous introduction and for hosting this seminar. I'm very, very proud and happy to be here. Never been to this building of Hong Kong U, even though I've come to Hong Kong U many, many times and know the Department of Geography very well. And it's my great privilege to be able to present some of my recent work to, of course, I think a very diverse audience. So feel free to question me later on any aspect. I've chosen to speak on something I'm reasonably familiar with, on the electronics industry, semiconductors, but also a bit more recent, bit contested aspects of that. All right, so we'll see how it goes. Basically, I will say quite a little bit on geopolitical shifts in this particular industry, some of the post-pandemic challenges, because this is kind of more public policy/audience. So I will start with, if you like, the policy public issues. Then second part, bring you sort of back to a bit more of academic research to show you a little bit how academic research has tackled some of these issues. And of course, say a few words about research agenda and policy and practice, and so on and so forth. The work that I've done has been funded by the National University of Singapore Global Production Network Center. These are my colleagues. This is some time ago in Singapore's Fullerton Hotel. The HSBC, Head of Asia Equity, Harold Wanda Lin, you might have known him. Flying Dutchman, he came all the way to Singapore to organize this workshop, bring together 40 risk analysts from investment banks and so on, and get us to talk to them, and so on and so forth. So And that was 2019 BC, all right? It's a long time ago before COVID. I'm afraid it's been a long time for all of us. And of course, this work has some academic basis. So this is the early book that I wrote with my co-director of the center, Yeung, on global production networks, published in Oxford, in which we developed this theory, which you will hear a little bit later on when I bring it back to the academic side. Then I've written something with Stanford University Press 2016 on, if you like, Taiwan, Singapore, and South Korea's industrial transformation, the role of the state, industrial policy in the world of global value chain and global production networks, and of course the most recent book that was published last year with Stanford University Press, which is on the electronics industry, the stuff that I'm going to talk to you about. So the earlier book, I've given a presentation to Madame Christine Lagarde when she came to Singapore on an unannounced visit. So we briefed her a little bit on Asia's development. Today you will hear a little bit from me about the newer work. All right, the 2022 work. Now we know something happened, unfortunately. Otherwise, I will see you. Thank you. In Hong Kong, we talk about being face. Thank you for being here, but I can't see your face because of this thing. All right. So, but I know you're here, so you've given me face already, beaming already. So thank you very much. We had this problem, but today we are not going to talk about this problem. All right. We're going to talk about the other problem, the problem that even an American president has to hold that little chip. Right. Semiconductors is one issue. Of course, unfortunately, there are many other crises in the past few years that we've encountered to do with chip shortages, supply chain disruptions, to do with, of course, inflation, trade war, actual wars, and Russian invasion of Ukraine, so on and so forth. Yeah. So some of these issues have led to a tremendous disruptions on a worldwide scale. For today's purpose, I will focus more specifically on, if you like, the electronics industry. Yeah, because the electronics industry that we have seen also some very, very hotly contested issues that might be of interest to you. So basically, I'm trying to bring these issues out and bring you to think about many of these issues in terms of how the world is interconnected, which I'm sure you're aware of, but also how these interconnections themselves are points of, if you like, clashes, points of trouble. So the term I use is we have trouble with global value chains, global production networks, the ways in which they are organized, and so on and so forth. All right, many of you have experienced chip shortages issues. One way or another, if you order a new car, 12 months, 14 months, and so on and so forth. How can that be? You're in Hong Kong, the logistics center of Asia. How can you take so long for these things to happen? Well, because of some shortages, right? So on and so forth. Intel CEO telling you this shortage will last till this year, 2023. Toyota has to cut its production because of very cheap chips that are not available, so on and so forth. Order of a new iPhone delay due to not just the assembly problem, but also shortages of those chips. On the other hand, you have, of course, the American president holding your wafer to tell you wafer not enough made in America. Not just the shortages, but also the idea that where the wafers should be manufactured, means the chips that are actually plucked out of each of these 12-inch wafer, right? And to the extent that, of course, the American Congress has finally approved this long-awaited law, act, known as the 52 Billion Chips Act, which is kind of American version of what we call industrial policy to promote a particular industry, in this case, semiconductor manufacturing. And I bet most of you cannot spell out CHIPS Act. It's very tedious and long. It's a bit un-American too. They're very long names. I can't even remember exactly. I think it's creating healthy incentives for the production of semiconductors. I mean, seriously, you can Google it. Okay, it is very long, but it's CHIPS Act. Got it? Okay, you got it. It is the European version. The Europeans are not losing it. So they are also putting up 43 billion EU CHIPS Act in a similar way, right? And there is no spelling issue here, right? It's just chips, right? And the point is, major continents and major countries are putting up unusually specific industrial policies to support the production of chips. Not this kind of chips that you and I eat, but chips that are not edible. Or if you eat, the Hong Kong Medical School will love you because they need to operate on you, and the surgeons will make good money. Recently, even the Canadian Ontario Member of Parliament went to Taiwan to back the TSMC, which is now everybody knows TSMC. When I did the research, nobody cared. What the hell is TSMC? Never heard of. Who cares? You only care about Apple, isn't it? So Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. Yeah. Now you can even spell out TSMC, right? You can't spell out BMW, can you? You know BMW, you can't. Bavaria Motor Work, right? Okay, but TSMC you know. Even the member of parliament went there, give us more chips. Why? Because Ontario depends on the employment of US automakers. And if you don't have enough chips, the automakers cannot make that many cars, and Ontario workers will either have less hours to work or lose their jobs, right? So can you imagine how these complex interactions to do it more chips, and more chips. Please send us more chips, right? So what I'm going to do now is to sort of bring you a bit closer to some of these economic issues which have been, unfortunately, or fortunately, I won't say fortunately, unfortunately, tied up with geopolitical shifts, all right? Okay, so the first big geopolitical issue on the table, as we all know, it has started before Biden, of course. It's the Trump administration that the US-China trade war has started by now. It's quite many years already, unlikely to stop in the coming years. So you're talking about this decade, 2020s. We are going to go through the entire 2020s, I'm afraid, with significant challenges in terms of trade wars. They, of course, give Huawei good business to study as well, because it's a trade economist. So when there is trade war, trade economists thrive. Unfortunately, we also have real geopolitical contest, Russian invasion. That's not a small matter. It leads to all kinds of complications, all kinds of shortages, of course, lives lost, and so on and so forth. That's one big chunk that reset a lot of the contexts in which the kind of economic processes that we study will operate in these coming years to come. Second, technological competition. It used to be fairly sort of economic in nature, but now technological competition, especially in semiconductors and other sort of segments, AI, and so on and so forth, have become politicized, right? So it's become part of the geopolitical context. So we are no longer talking about simple technological competition, which can be very much benefiting from international collaborations. Now international academic scientific collaborations have been sort of brought into some of these geopolitical contexts as well. So the point I want to make to you is that previously we just think of it as pure economic issues to be resolved, chip shortages. Now you cannot just think economically. You have to think economically and politically. And I use the term geopolitically because I'm a geographer, right? So I'm very interested in the geographical political implications of this kind of thing. The third point, which many of you are aware of, is Hong Kong. This is very important for Hong Kong. The idea of manufacturing dependency on China, and here we talk about less dependency. I think what many places elsewhere have learned is that you can't just depend on all stuff made in China. Yeah? So I think this is a fair point. Of course, nobody wants to put all eggs in one basket, right? So we don't want to put all your money in Hong Kong because you can put some in Singapore too. So I'm advertising for asset managers in Singapore. Please come, go ahead. But shifting is not simple. Many of you say, it's easy to shift. Apple can shift out of China. If it's so easy, it would have been done. It's very difficult, very complicated, lots of costs, lots of different firms, network partners are involved. So for example, estimates will have shown you that for Apple to ship even 10% of its production from China to India will have taken 5 to 8 years, because you need massive relocation of many different components, parts, suppliers in the whole ecosystem. For Samsung, many of you might have shipped entirely its production of smartphones from China to Vietnam. It takes almost 10 years. And they already did it without any of these kind of geopolitical tensions, pandemic issues, and so on. Yeah? So we're talking about pretty complex ways to reduce dependency on China. Reducing dependency on China has to be the imperative. That's understandable. I come from Southeast Asia. Thank you very much. We'll benefit from this, right? But having said that, it's not easy. You know that, right? That's the issue I want to outline to you. Fourth, more countries have started to pursue industrial policy, which is a bit unusual because in my previous book, 2016, I've already argued that actually in Taiwan, South Korea, and even Singapore, where I come from, it's more difficult for the state to tell the private sector what to do, and that's classic industrial policy. Yeah? If you think of Samsung was told to go into electronics because Pan Chung-hee, then the president of South Korea, wanted Samsung to do it, right? So on and so not so simple. But then now, if you want to pursue industrial policy, it's much harder because there are many, many more complications. And as I'm showing you next, the world production becomes a lot more complicated and interconnected, meaning other countries, other players get involved. Now, the US is pursuing, for example, CHIPS Act for America. China is pursuing Made in China 2025, and so on and so forth. These are big projects. China is committing, as you know, right now is reviewing that, right? 150 billion big fund, if you like. US, as I told you, wants to spend 52 billion to help save Intel and others. Intel from the US, as you know. But if you look at what actually one company, TSMC, you have just heard, TSMC last year, now it's 2023, 2022, originally planned to spend something like 40 to 44 billion, but because of the slightly recent oversupply of chips, they're spending about 36. So TSMC last year, 2022, would have actually spent 36 billion, one company. US is how much? 52, right? So can you imagine one company can spend 36 billion. This year they're planning to spend another 36 billion. Can you imagine of the quantum? You know, you talk about a whole government, 52, right? 150. One company, 36. 2 years, 72. So we are talking about an industry whereby the big players themselves are very, very big. They're not going to be easily listening to you. Of course, they may listen to some of these policy initiatives. Nicely, we say it's industrial policy. Not so nice, we say it's technological sovereignty, right? So this is the ASML, Dutch company that makes the machine in November last year announcement. That the ASML makes that photocopying machine that makes the chips, if you like, the most advanced chips. It's a monopoly. It's in their interest to sell more machines, and yet they're telling you that don't go regional. Why? Because it's going to hurt everybody, right? And they've outlined some of these initiatives. US CHIPS Act, EU CHIPS Act, China saying 150 billion, but actually spend 2030 currently. The remaining 120, maybe not. Right now it's reviewing it. Taiwan wants to give more incentives and credit for TSMC. Korea wants to spend government-wise up to 450 billion, together with, of course, investment from Samsung and SK Hynix. This is semiconductors. Japan wants to put in 4-5 billion, which is really insignificant in terms of the quantum. All these initiatives in what we call technological sovereignty problem. They have ASML, remember the machine maker is telling you that it's going to lead to at least 10% or higher basically wastage because of duplication of facilities, because of basically you are using machines which are not suitable for making certain kind of chips because you want them there, and so on and so forth. They've given you actual estimate by 2030. Basically, this is not an efficient, optimal way of running the world. So question is, do you want to pay for 10% discount and get, if you like, some kind of regionalization of production? Possible, but it's not optimal, right? So TSMC, recently the CEO came out and told you, and this is from him, that everyone has, when he went to, this is C.C. Wei, and this is Chairman Mark Liu, and of course the middle you should know. If you don't know, you shouldn't be here listening to this, right? The President of America, right? Affect you and me immediately, whatever he does. Everyone wants to build their own semiconductor factories, but is that realistic? If it was that easy, there would be chip making plants everywhere in the world already. This is the CEO of TSMC telling you how many? Less than a month ago, all right? When he opened the Tainan fab, the 3 nano fab, to go into mass production, means the most advanced fab of TSMC that went into mass production, meaning they have achieved sufficient yield and productivity to do mass production. Not easy. He's telling you, not easy. If it's easy, you have gotten it everywhere. Take TSMC as example. Even within our own or their own company, transferring technology we developed from the Taiwanese city Hsinchu. Hsinchu was where TSMC started, to our site in Tainan. Tainan is the south of Taiwan. Require a lot of hard work, painstaking work. Never mind moving from Hsinchu to the US. US refers to a TSMC fab in Arizona. Yeah. So it's very difficult to do this kind of, opening up of new facilities in that particular industry. You will say, oh, what's the big deal? You put $50 billion, surely you get the good stuff. Just buy machine, isn't it? If it's so easy, as he said, it will be everywhere already. It's not easy, because it's not just machines, but people, but ecosystem, but many other things that are required to be put together, and that take time. You can't do it overnight. Yeah? And of course, meanwhile, policy initiatives that have, of course, geopolitical context, and of course, in the U.S. context, national security considerations such as the Department of Commerce new imposition on technology export restrictions on China will have, of course, reshuffled many of these, if you like, restructuring possibilities in the semiconductor industry. Actually, China wasn't advanced at all, right? So the U.S. imposition on China is really preemptive in this sense, all right? China was never advanced in semiconductor manufacturing, okay? But as we are talking about all these, okay, build more fab, actually the real world electronics industry, the industry that buys the chips, is not doing well, right? It's not doing well. So the last quarter to today, how many of you have bought a new PC or smartphone in the last 1 year? Raise your hand. New PC or smartphone, raise your hand. All right? See, not enough. Only a few of you. Come on, I mean, you ever bought the year before, because the year before you had to do Zoom, you have to teach at home, or learn at home, or study at home. So the problem is that the refreshment of smartphones, PCs, the two segments that take up 60% of the chips. Of all chips ever made, 60% go into smartphone and PCs, right? Particularly smartphones. If you're not keep buying my favorite Apple, or so I should advertise someone else, then you have trouble, all right? Or the industry is in trouble. So the industry right now, if you look at data from last quarter, basically most are in negative terrain. Samsung, particularly the memory guys, all right? Samsung, SK Hynix, Micron from the US, even Nvidia and AMD, these are the chip design companies, all in trouble, all right? And the prediction, I mean the forecast this year of semiconductor industry, for example, typically forecast anything from 6 to 20% decline in 2023. Not very good, okay? If you have a lot of excess capital, don't buy semiconductor shares, all right? PC and smartphone forecast for the coming year, 10 to 15% decline as well. This is from Intel a few days ago. Intel's investor meeting, the chief commerce officer was showing you PC total TAM for total accessible market. It's a total available market. If you look at PC, from year 2010, 10 years ago to now, roughly similar. It's not like there is tremendous growth, actually. Basically, you just have to take it that for PC, it's more or less mature. There are not going to be many more units, extra customers suddenly pop up from, unless it's outer space, all right? For PC install base, same. You see, it's basically declining, right? So smartphone face the same. Basically, we are not talking about significant improvement in the market this year, coming years. More or less stable, all right? So the semiconductor sort of sudden hot heat is a bit unusual. It may be just a bit, okay? Then, of course, there are further issues with, for example, chip alliances. Some of you may be familiar with this, that the US, together with Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, get together in terms of technological development, new generation chip design, and so on and so forth. Now, and of course, the tricky issue here is that even Taiwan and South Korea, even Japan, are still thinking how much they want to support the US-led initiative, right, in terms of curbing semiconductor technology development in China. So again, the point I'm trying to raise to you is that on the geopolitical front is in itself very difficult to be resolved. Even the country partners may not come on board fully. Now I'm going to tell you more about the industry, the actual economic side of this is also very difficult. All right? And of course, you will have heard, you have seen, of course, President Biden opening up the Arizona fab. It's groundbreaking work for TSMC. And TSMC also promised to spend more, $40 billion, to build the 3 nano fab that will be opened by 2025. But as I just said earlier, is 3 nano fab in China already started mass production last month, which means by 2025, the Arizona fab will be not the most advanced by definition. So you're talking about American not having the most advanced fab, right? So is it worth it? So on and so forth. The Trump and Foxconn case, I'm not going to tell you. It didn't go well as well, right? As you know, Guo Taiming from Taiwan, Foxconn guy, promised then Trump that he will invest 20 billion, I think, in Wisconsin. And today, I think only 10% maybe. So basically, a lot of this nice opening up, the actual happening, difficult. Why? Because this kind of economic activities are very, very complex in terms of industrial organization. If you do not fully understand the industrial organization of global value chains and global production networks, it's going to be very hard to really capture the right parts of it. That's the gist of today's presentation. You've got to know how these things are organized in order to get the right parts. You want the whole thing to yourself? Not possible. Not possible, right? So that's what I call the trouble with global production networks. Now, what do we do as academics? We try to study this thing by unpacking everything that, if you like, constitute the production network or value chain. All right. So this is the Global Value Chain Development Report 2021, which has already come out with funded by the World Trade Organization and Asia Development Bank. The 2023 is currently being written. I'm involved in reauthoring the chapter on semiconductors, but there are many other chapters that talk about also geopolitical context and so on. But the 2021 is already out, it's free, you can download. Academically, there are many studies done for the past 25 years on global value chains, global production networks. These are terms that you will have heard of. Today, of course, global supply chain issues are known by everybody, because if you didn't get your toilet paper, surely you know supply chain problems, do you? Yeah. So if you have no toilet paper, you don't care about chips, I know. You care about toilet paper, fair enough. All right? Because everybody has to do that thing. We are interconnected in this business. This is the kind of not so small community, but the academics themselves are very interconnected. What do we study? We study, if you like, in the early days, a sociologist called Gary Giraffi, well known. He started some of this research in terms of global value chain, the term, by studying what's called the governance structure of the chain, right? How different players in the chain would have been governed. Now, the reason I raise this because I'm here at Asia Global Institute, AGI, which was formerly the Feng Institute, am I right? Yeah, so Li and Feng. Now, Li and Feng would be Gary Giraffi's classic case, right? Middleman, Hong Kong trader, being able to source for US retailers, manufacturers in China, right? It's very important, if you like, commodity chain. The US customers, consumers wouldn't have gotten their favorite cheap toys and garments without Li and Feng sourcing out of China. Right? Of course, as Victor Feng himself would have told you, the typical Levi's jeans will have to pass Hong Kong-China border 5 times. Yeah? Li and Feng coordinates that. Of course, make good money out of it, fair enough, and fund the institute. So on and so we should be thankful. The phenomenon we study actually helps to fund our research, which is great. Then the study will be who controls what. Is it the US retailer controlling and who control the supplier, or they are all interconnected one way or another? So that's what one group of scholars study. The other group of scholars will have studied, okay, if we can find out who does what and controls and coordinate what, then who gets more out of the value? Because you pay $150 for your Levi's jeans, but the person who stitched your jeans wouldn't have gotten 150. Maybe 150 if he or she is lucky, typically it's a she, right? Because the female workers in factories. Then who gets the rest, right? Is it Levi's? Is it Li and Feng? And so on and so forth. So that's what we call upgrade, value upgrade. Who gets what? And there are many parts of the world who want to get upgraded. Just like tonight I want to get upgraded to business. If Singapore Airlines allow me, I'm on economy, right? So we shall see, all right? Nobody will downgrade themselves, but normally you ask for upgrade. So that's one chunk of study. The other chunk of studies, what we do would be to sort of build on this body of work and develop this notion of global production networks. In other words, we sort of complicate the matter a bit more by saying, hey, it's not just about a chain A leads to B, B leads to C, but also they are all networked together. So the idea is that GPN, global production networks, help us to understand perhaps a bit better the power relation between different actors in the chain, the network. It helps us to understand development outcomes, why certain places that are plugged into global value chains get more developed or less developed than others. This more or less plugged in, we call it strategic coupling. The idea is that you couple strategically with global firms. So for example, Li and Feng helps many Chinese manufacturers to couple with, say, Levi's global production networks. So Foxconn helped many other suppliers to plug into Apple's global production networks. So this idea of strategic coupling helps us to understand why certain places get more developed. And we have developed a theory in the OUP book I mentioned. So this is the famous diagram. If you do this kind of research, you will have seen this diagram, how value chain can be governed in that famous paper by Gary Giraffe, John Humphrey, and Tim Sturgeon in 2005, published in Review of International Political Economy. So some value chains are more modular, some will be more relational, some will be more captive, right? And of course, you have the market and hierarchy of typical Oliver Williamson's kind of transaction called economics. Yeah. And in real life, these are the people we get together. So this is Gary Giraffe, John Humphrey, and Tim Sturgeon in 2009. There are people now over 10,000 citations, so it's pretty well known. Right? 10,000 citations in academia is basically Hong Kong terms, 小散台, means you're done, you can close shop, right? You're good, you'll be well known. And recently we met up in Amsterdam conference, Tim Sturgeon, Gary Giraffe, and to those of you who are early career and grad students, that's what I want to tell you. Academics, we should have fun, right? We get together, drink, sing song together. Also do some serious work, like this time. All right. Okay. So this is the diagram that briefly summarizes the theory behind, if you like, some of the empirical things you heard from me earlier on. What is this? We are trying to explain the strategies that firms pursue, right? Strategies, whether TSMC, whether Li and Feng, whether Foxconn, whether suppliers to Foxconn undertake. These are the strategies firms do. How do we explain that? We go all the way back to the independent variable we call causal dynamics. What are these causal dynamics? So for a firm to do this, you will have to consider what's called cost capability, market making, financial discipline, and risk. What does each mean? Briefly, very briefly. I mean, we've written a whole book on this, so I can't really go through it. In terms of cost, remember when Apple outsourced to Foxconn to assemble the iPhone over 2 billion units now since 2007, it's not just because Foxconn is cheap. You may have thought it's cheap. It's not just cheap. It's cheap and good. You know what's cheap and good? Cost capability ratio. When you go shopping, you don't just want something cheap, you want something good, isn't it? You want cheap and bad, you're foolish. Huh? You're not a rational consumer. You want the subcontractor to be very capable, but at very low cost. That's ideal, wonderful. Stick with it. And that's what happened to the Apple-Foxconn partnership. For now, how many? 16 years now. Billions of units assembled. You would have said, oh yeah, we can steal that business by being cheaper. But can you be as capable as Foxconn in terms of managing the logistics, in terms of factory throughput, in terms of, yes, managing labor relations, and so on and so on? Not so easy. If it's so easy, you try to take on Foxconn to have a good time, right? Second, market. Market is important. Why? Because we know very well firms do certain things in order to develop new markets. Why is that important? In the interest of the, say, semiconductor industry, you have said, oh, semicon, of course, America is very important. Yes, but actually, in terms of the output, smartphones, PC market currently, since about 2015, the world's biggest market, guess where? It's actually in Asia. Asia is now the world's biggest market for PCs and smartphones. All right, America is big, but not the biggest anymore. Used to be the biggest. So because of that, it's fair to say you do expect the chip makers to be located in Asia, isn't it? Because, I mean, okay, chips are easy to fly, true, but then it's not just the end product. In the design and manufacturing process, you need close discussion with, if you like, the printed circuit board maker, the PC and smartphone, you know, if you like, function and chip design, I mean, the device designers as well, engineers. So you can't just keep saying that, oh no, it can be made in America and then shipped to China to be assembled. It doesn't work very well that way, all right? So that's in terms of access to market matter. Third is finance. Okay, you have in Hong Kong, I don't have to tell you about the importance of finance, right? No money, no talk, yeah? So, but today, I think it's free, they are not chargeable, so don't worry, there is such a thing called free lunch. I got my free lunch, no, free lunch not so free. I got my lunch, I have to deliver a talk, all right? And financial discipline, why is it so important? It's important because we actually find empirically that, for example, American firms, say Dell, HP, driven by Wall Street pressure, tends to adopt more outsourcing culture than, say Lenovo. Lenovo is a large PC guy, publicly listed in Hong Kong. It has a bit different way of managing its own finance in the sense that it's less subject to, if you like, financial market pressure, and hence is able to internalize more of production. So Lenovo actually makes some of its PCs about 30-40%, outsource the rest to the Taiwanese makers. So again, you have seen Samsung assembles every of this Galaxy phone internal. Apple, exact competitor, outsource everything to Foxconn and others. See the difference? Exact same competitor, but very different approach to internalization or internal control, intra-firm coordination as a point of extra-firm coordination. However, we never thought when we developed the theory that the idea of risk would have become today so prominent. We never thought, we thought it's useful to put it in, but we never thought, for example, geopolitical risk today will have significant impact on the ways in which firm bargain with extra-firm, non-firm entity, in this case, say, government, regulation. So Huawei is a classic example. Huawei used to just do its thing, right? Once there is significant geopolitical imposition that become a risk, Huawei has to adopt very different strategies. For example, offloading its smartphone division. You just can't sustain it, right? So on and so forth. So the idea here is that GPN, a global production network outcome, needs to be understood in relation to the combination of these dynamics that in turn help us eventually all the way down to national and regional development outcomes. So schematically, you just think of, say, there are, Silicon Valley, there is here, and then there is, say, Taiwan, some of the activities here. These are interconnected through, say, HP. If this is the HP example, HP's activity in Palo Alto near Stanford, right, will have affected some of the activities in Taiwan. That's how these interconnections take place. They are driven by interconnections within those production networks and value chain. That's really what we are trying to talk about. And this is just a schema. Okay, so I shall be very brief in terms of the technical details to save you some hassles. This will be complexity. I think I'll skip the semiconductors technical details, save you some time. This is what the PC in the show. Okay, just say a few words about semiconductor. Okay, so you won't be able to see the numbers at the back. I'm sorry. So otherwise, the opticians will have no business if you can see this. I just want to outline the main findings. All right, the main findings is this. Number one, in year 2000, this table summarizes the production capacity of all of the wafer fabs in the world. Few hundred, 300, 350 around. I have data on every single one in terms of capacity level, technology level, customers, and so on and so on. Okay, this is to summarize that. In year 2000, the US was still significant, 1.3 million wafers made per month. Right? Normally that's how we measure in industry. Japan was very big, was 1.7 million. South Korea was 1 million. Taiwan was much smaller than the US, about half, 0.7 million. Oh, by the way, this table is from a paper in Economic Geography 2021. You can download it, open access, free, all right? And then, of course, China was very small. Actually, in year 2000, China's wafer capacity is only 84,000. Imagine when the US was 1.3 million, China was only 800,000. It's nothing in relative terms. China in year 2000 was insignificant. All right. Even Singapore, I think we are a little red dot. We have double China's capacity. We have 167,000 wafers made per month 20 years ago. Can you imagine that? That's how things have changed over time. By 2018, with the data we have, Korea will be, Taiwan is the biggest, 4 million. So Taiwan grew a lot, right? From less than 1 million to 4 million. South Korea became 3.5 million, Japan was 3 million. The US grew 1.7, just not a lot, 1.7 million. China, from very little to 2 million. So you see China's actual capacity grew up. A technology level separate matter, yeah? Just look at purely size. If you're from Europe, you do have to worry, because Europe's total capacity is about 1 million. And even Singapore, where I come from, is slightly more than the entire Europe. You won't believe it. All of the fabs in Singapore add up, make more chips than all the fabs in Europe add up. So now if you are from Europe, you have to worry, because Europe should be very strong in semiconductors. Philips, for example. Philips Semiconductor was the origin of the technology that was transferred to TSMC. Philips used to own 40% of TSMC when it first started. Right? So if you are a Dutch person, you should be either on one hand worry about this, on the other hand happy that you make a machine that everybody needs, ASML. Okay, this is more recent 2020 data. So in 2020, interestingly, The US is about 46% of the market of semiconductors. So you see the US is not making a lot of chips, but it's actually the actual, how do I put it, the actual owners of those chips. So if you design, say Apple, design the chip made by TSMC, but actually it's owned by Apple. TSMC, remember, is the central kitchen. It makes the burger, it makes the chow mein, it makes the 3 Michelin star plate to serve you. But TSMC doesn't get the money from the consumers. Remember this. TSMC is the central kitchen making for the chefs. The chefs own the chips. Got it? And 46% of the chefs are based in the US, meaning the firms that actually outsource the chip making to TSMC. However, you look at manufacturing capacity, it's fair to say, yes, Taiwan is 22% of chip making. 90% of the most advanced chips. That worries you. South Korea, memory, 21. Japan 15. And here, yes, Europe is only 9. US is 12%. So if you like, US and Taiwan add together, is roughly what Taiwan is making in terms of capacity. Yeah, capacity is total. Okay, so I will skip this one and the last one and jump straight to the last part by saying that I'll give you some flavor because it's very complex in terms of the actual economics of it and the geographical configurations of them. I can't really explain everything. Ideally read the book. If not, download the article, at least it's a shorter form, easier. I just want to end by saying that, of course, as you can tell, there seems to be a lot of complexity that require unpacking, that require us academics to sort of theorize and, of course, empirically study it. From a policy point of view, I do need to urge you to think a bit more about whenever you consider an issue to be a supply chain or GPM issue, can you ask yourself, do I actually know what that supply chain is? Can I actually open the supply chain and know what is inside? You can't just say it's a chain. But what's inside the chain? I don't know, somebody knows. But it is a supply chain problem. Are you sure? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's something else. So the point I'm trying to make is that we need to figure out, whether someone loses a job or someone loses, the company goes bankrupt, or I don't know, the whole industry fail. Is it because it's a supply chain or GPM problem? So Nokia used to do very well, as you know. Nokia, the smartphone, the mobile phone company, right? It's no longer, nobody buying Nokia phone. Anything, no mobile Nokia phone. So is that a GPM problem? The downfall of Nokia, is that a GPM problem? Actually, as an expert, I can tell you, yes, it is a GPM problem, right? Because I know this industry well enough to say so, all right? But if, say, Intel is not doing well in chip making, is it a GPM problem? Maybe not, because it's Intel's own failure in implementing its 10 nanometer technology. So that is its own internal failure. All right? And by the way, because it monopolized more or less the CPU, so it cannot be because the competitors are eating away its money, so to speak, right? So in that sense, you have to unpack the black box. Yeah? Very, very important. And second is to say, as you can tell, I've explained to you very quickly the 4 different variables. Sort of play around with them, whatever case you're looking at, whether it's Li and Fo bringing good business to say Levi's jeans to make it really good, cheap and good, or because of market development and so on and so forth. The third point is that we know now the role of the state and institutional contexts are very important. It used to be not so important in the sense that it's more stable global environment, say up to 2015 and 16. As you can tell from the Trump administration started off, basically there are many more sort of international economic tensions, that's how I put it. It becomes much harder to predict what government wants to do or would like to do. So the role of the state, positively or negatively, has to be understood and taken into consideration. Now, whether you are business people, or academics, or policymakers, unfortunately, the state cannot be just seen as a benign external player of supply chain, put it in short. The state becomes a very important player, which we have to spend a lot of time understanding them. Finally, I just want to say that there are 3 key issues for policy practice you might want to consider. Technology remains the key shaper in the coming decade to come for A to Z reason, right? Because technology is shaping and driving our everyday life. Second is that we know, after not having your toilet paper and masks, network resilience or supply chain resilience become a single, very, very important issue. It's not to run away. Now, resilience doesn't come cheap. Yeah? Resilience is not the most efficient thing to happen. If you need resilience, means something must have gone wrong, isn't it? If your personal resilience is high, it means you must have experienced failure, isn't it? Otherwise, there is no resilience to talk about. Meaning, in a business sense, economic sense, network resilience has to be done, understood. But then you have to understand there are costs associated with resilience, meaning duplication, multiple sourcing, different locations, and we have to then understand what resilience means much more deeper, not just to say, oh, okay, be resilient. Wow, what does that mean? Are you giving more resources to build resilience? And so on and so forth. Final point is about the politics of all this. By now you should get a good feel that this kind of thing are no longer pure economic undertaking. It used to be, but has become a lot more politicized, and hence we do, unfortunately, we cannot just leave it as pure economic matter. You have to sort of really understand the political underpinnings of many of some of this production network, value chain reconfigurations in the coming years in this decade. So on that, I wish you all the best in this, and hopefully we have a good time in the next decade if we are long enough. So thank you, everybody.
So I guess we have 15 minutes for Q&A. First of all, thank you very much, Professor Yeung, for a very dynamic, entertaining, and insightful presentation. It's not easy to talk about both supply chains and semiconductors in less than, I would say, half an hour. But as the moderator of this session, and I'm going to open up the floor for Q&A, let me ask a first and perhaps straightforward question, and it's related to your earlier point that many governments started to implement their industrial policies, and by the way, including the one in Hong Kong. Coming from Singapore, and this may be related to your topic, but more related to your experience as a researcher in Singapore so many years. Do you think this is two questions, right? Do you think this is necessary for governments to think this way, even at the cost of distorting the market? Because everyone is doing it, and there's like huge concerns about security. And second, do you think the Singaporean, I mean, this is maybe not something that you could confidently speak on, do you think the Singaporean industrial policy has been successful? Is there any lesson, maybe for Hong Kong, maybe for the United States?
Oh, very challenging. Second question. First question, I actually do think that there is a role of the state, for the state, because I'm not a sort of strong believer in what's called laissez-faire neoliberal economy. When I was young, my PhD was on Hong Kong investment in Southeast Asia. The days when Evan Chan was still the professor here, Chan Kuan Yew, the director of then Center for Asian Studies. And I even wrote a paper critiquing then the colonial government's laissez-faire, beautiful rights, small government, laissez-faire, do nothing. And then, of course, you end up labor-intensive moving to the north, right? Hong Kong didn't have so much industrial upgrading. So my point is that the role of the state is critical, particularly in industrial restructuring, upgrading, which is related to GP and GVC activities. The question is the how to do, not whether the state should do. The state has to be there. And of course, there are others who also argue that even America had what's called hidden industrial policy for a long time. For example, your iPhone touchpad came out of US military research that then has been applied, commercialized. So it's not like the US is not funding actual technological shifts. Yeah? It's just a lot went into the military that they commercialized. Second question, I passed my PCR test, but can I get boarding tonight? Singapore Airlines I may be denying boarding. No, I'm kidding. I don't care. But the point is that I think so far the Singapore government has been fairly successful in certain industries. So for example, semiconductors is surprising, right? That we actually make as much chips as Europe. Singapore actually also holds about 20% of the world's semiconductor equipment manufacturing. So about 1/5 of the world's equipment, applied material, KLA, Lam Research, they are all in Singapore as well. So on this industry, we are quite successful. Pharmaceutical, quite successful. But for example, biomedical has been up. Okay, so biomedical, pharmaceutical, same, not the same. Pharmaceuticals are about making drugs. Life sciences will be about new discoveries, which are not necessarily to do with drugs, could be to do with treatment and other things. Now, life sciences, you have heard, we have put in a lot of money, a lot of resources to nurture, to be the so-called Boston of the East right? Today, there are critiques that we haven't been able to achieve enough. For example, there is no blockbuster, whether drugs or treatment that came out of all of these life science initiatives in Singapore. So in that sense, I think in terms of biotech, we are not as successful as in semicon and electronics, and so on and so forth. So that would be my not so short answer to Toby's question. Yeah.
I actually have a follow-up question, but let me
check about it later. Yeah.
people from the audience to ask that question first. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd like to follow up on Singapore, especially your PhD is in Hong Kong investments in Southeast Asia, and I want you to talk more about Southeast Asia. Because part of the fallout of the geopolitical process that we see from Hong Kong, because I myself in the electronics industry, is that many people move to Vietnam, Southeast Asia, but you didn't talk about that whole part. And also the possibility, because over the last 40 years or so, the Hong Kong-China equation forms a supply chain for Lexus. Is there a possibility that the Singapore Southeast Asian network will become that in the future next 10 years?
This is, again, pretty challenging question. I think the first part I have to say, there are many opportunities now to go to Southeast Asia, Vietnam or otherwise, to set up shops, because there are many more lead firms. Lead firms means the OEMs generally, as you call them, who would like, if you like, the production networks to at least to partially move out of China, right? So in that sense, I would say Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand are very good places to go. Myanmar is much more difficult because of the political condition. Vietnam, of course, the current issue is that the big guys are there, right? Because Samsung is there, and Foxconn wants to go there, and then you want to avoid that because you don't want to be next to them. You won't get your workers because they will pay higher than you, right? So that's the big problem. So that's for the first part of the question. Second part, can Singapore sort of perform the role as sort of Hong Kong and Greater China's role? Harder, because first, we are not a sort of a Chinese entity in Southeast Asia. You have to verify, have to tread this very carefully, this ethnic issue, right? Because our neighbor, which is Malaysia, has a racialized political process, as you know, in terms of Malay first principle. So we can never integrate it by claiming, hey, we are all Chinese, Greater China, the Greater Bay kind of concept. We can't. That I think we have a natural disadvantage from sort of geographical point of view. So our only we don't have advantage in that sense to be able to develop that kind of regional integration, despite the relative progress in what's called the ASEAN Economic Community, right? So we have the ASEAN Economic Community, free trade agreement, and so on. Apparently, the implementation is still quite slow. If you are doing business, you want to cross a few borders in Southeast Asia, supposed to be zero tariffs, one-stop service, all this and that. In actual practice, not fully implemented. Supposed to be 2025, I think, fully implemented. I'm not sure. So I am cautiously optimistic. That's why I cannot believe. Yeah. But do come and invest. Thank you very much.
Finally, I encourage you, all of you who ask questions, to introduce yourself and talk about where you're from, if you feel comfortable.
Well, first of all, thank you for a fascinating lecture. Now, you're quite right in flagging up technology up front. A number of new technologies are already on the horizon. For example, in China, of course, they're developing graphite as a different means of transmission from silicon. So if they're transiting from silicon to graphite, it's going to be game-changing for the industry. Now, as far as the chips are concerned, of course there are chips, but then there are different types of chips. For example, China apparently is developing photonic chips and also quantum chips. So these are early days yet, but again, it's going to be game-changing. Apart from the technology, the supply chain itself seems to be facing new technological challenges. For example, blockchain is going to make a great deal of difference how you do business, and how business are distributed, and how supply chains are distributed. So what do you have to say about this emergence of all these new technologies? After all, we're in the era of technological revolution. So what do you say about this impact on the picture you're painting? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think these are very insightful addition to sort of elaborate on the matter of technological competition and shifts. One is to do with sort of new, one may argue new material for, say, chip making, so to speak. Second is to do with, if you like, the world of the digital world, whereby blockchain plays a significant role. I have no expertise on blockchain, nor being a physicist, understanding the, if you like, the material science sides of your first part. But I do have to say on the first part, the tricky situation is this. Let's say there is a new breakthrough in no more semiconductor, but say superconductors, for the sake of argument, right? So the Moore's law no longer relevant. Moore's law means in terms of number of transistors that can put in the chip in terms of same size, and hence revolution in the way in which we communicate quantum computing and so on and so forth. Now, question is the users. Now, at the end of the day, technology can be changing and revolutionized. Question is the commercialization of that technology into actual, at the end of the day, to make money, devices and products that you and me get. Now, how? So this is where the understanding of GP and GVC becomes important. The reason is because if China becomes isolated for the sake of argument, and yet being able to develop, for some reason, these new technologies, but you cannot find the users. Why? Because the users are the PC and smartphone makers. You might say, oh no, Lenovo is PC maker. Sure, maybe Lenovo PCs may not be selling so well. Smartphone, China has Oppo, Xiaomi, Vivo, right? But then again, if they are not selling to the outside world because of these new technologies, they are not, for some reason, let's say, allowed to be sold outside, then you're not able to then, if you like, commercialize the technologies in such a way that then help to revolutionize those devices as well. So this kind of, if you like, technology and user interface need, ideally, in a really interconnected world, no barrier, right? Any user worldwide can be plugged into this development of the technology. But with the kind of, if there is really true decoupling in technology, I worry that the sort of new technologies in China, if you like, make it simple, can only be used in China. If that's the case, then it's not clear whether those technologies will have worldwide adoption. So I can't tell. Blockchain side, no big expertise to tell, so I better not comment further on it. Thank you. But very insightful.
Feel free to speak up and say your name and institution.
Andrew Collier, I'm an independent researcher on China's macroeconomy. One of the big concerns, as you mentioned, is the ability of the nation state to impose its will such that it achieves its goals regardless of other nation states. And I'm curious, given the rise of the fabless era over the last 20, 25 years, companies like NVIDIA and ASML, which is designed for equipment, have immense power geopolitically. So in a war scenario or a pre-war scenario where the threat is imposed, isn't there a possibility that the actual production is less important than the design, and therefore nation states will not be willing to impose their wishes, which would essentially mean that Biden's program is probably not that helpful?
I certainly agree with your last line. The Biden's program is not going to be very helpful, and is unlikely able to achieve its original policy desire, which is to curb China, so to speak. Why? And going back to some of you may be less familiar with the semiconductor industry, I think he's talking about fabless means a chip design firm, in this case NVIDIA, which is famous for its graphics processing unit, the GPU that goes into PC, servers, AI, and so on and so forth. And NVIDIA is very, very big now. That designs a chip that get made by TSMC. And then this point is that if where the chip is made is no longer so important than where the chip is designed, then why bother with fixing the production side, right? Okay. Now the complication is this, right? That's why NVIDIA is part of the 46% market share of the US. Because NVIDIA, if you like, about 10 to 12% of TSMC revenue goes to NVIDIA's order, and then belongs to the US actually, because it's US design chips that get made in Taiwan. 25% goes to Apple. That's TSMC revenue breakdown. Okay. So if we don't, put it this way, if we try to give more attention to where the chips get designed rather than where the chips get made, the problem will be this, is that when the chips get designed, we then still have to go into functions. So you can't just design chips for the sake of it. You design chips because you want to fulfill certain market roles, certain embedded devices, certain AI machines, and what have you. So because of that, again, where are the customers? So actually, ultimately, it remains to be market. The market becomes very important. So if you ask me overall, I would say where the chips are made are less important perhaps than where the markets will be. Market has to be the most important. In the economic sense, because I mean, if you're in business, I don't have to tell you the market is important. You'd be foolish otherwise. Even though your cost is high, but if your market can take it, doesn't matter. Doesn't even matter where it's made. If your market, your customers are willing to buy, who cares? As long as you get money, right? So that's the moral of the story. Question is then, what are the markets? Where are they located? What sort of market segments? Whether it's commercial, industrial, military, and so on and so forth. So that's sort of my take on this matter. Thank you.
I want to ask a follow-up. As you said in one of your slides, so the market is here in Asia. But the brands still belong to most of the US or Western companies. So how can we sort of transform the market values into actually profits that are being captured in this part of the world?
Yeah. In the segments I study, which is smartphone, PC, and for consumer electronics, I've chosen just TV. TV is entirely Asian now, all the brands. To your amazement, even Philips, the last frontier has been taken out because it's been acquired. Philips TV, the brand, you see Philips, is actually no longer owned by Philips. Yeah? But for PC, you're only left with three, only HP, Dell, and Apple, right? The rest are all Asia. So it's Lenovo, Asus, Acer, and so on and so forth. For smartphone, apart from Apple, nothing else, no Asia. Right? Only Apple in the US, Samsung, and all the Chinese brands, and so on. So you are actually talking about significant shift also at the what we call OEM level, meaning the lead firm themselves. However, what goes into the Xiaomi smartphone, a lot of it will still be designed in Silicon Valley, the chip designs and so on and so forth. So the complication here is that Asia is a big market now, but then in terms of the original design capabilities, in technology terms, in aesthetics terms, remains relatively weaker. So there is still a long journey to go in terms of Asia's sort of, if you like, leading role in this kind of technological shifts. It will still take some time. I don't think Silicon Valley can be replaced easily, put it that way. Partly because I know very well, two of my best students in my cohort at DBS, 1988, went to Silicon Valley. 98 of you, two of them. When? Yeah, my classmates. I was the number 3 in class. Yeah. I had 2 9As in my class, so in DBS. Wait, I didn't tell you I was number 3 from the bottom. But today I'm the professor. They are the actually ICT guys in Silicon Valley. Yeah. The best of Asian brains, as you know, including himself, went. But luckily, you guys got him back, right? So.
All right, 2 or 3 more questions. Yeah, Michael.
As you said, if Asia is the large market, so although if China develop high technology, the other side, say the Western, do not take it, that will limit commercialization and R&D. But reversely, U.S. may have the same problem now, right? Because if they do not sell high tech to China, they do not have the market to further their R&D. So will you predict some reverse of trend of R&D, maybe backward, or there will be last R&D, or geographically, will it be two parallel running, that China is leading the developing country like the Middle East and the South America or Africa will use Huawei 5G, and the other side will it be a parallel run, and on the Western side also R&D will be slowing because there's no market. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, this is, as you can tell, really the fundamental question about this topic. The current context, the so-called East-West, China-US, right, in terms of technological frontiers and so on. Will there be parallel systems and so on? And my own prediction is I dare not predict. Why? Because don't trust me. I always get it wrong. Right? I always tease people by saying, if you trust finance professors, they won't be in business school. That's why they, the only thing I can get myself right is geography, all right? If you want to find out where's the roast up, the nice place in Hong Kong, I can give you some place on Google Map. So, anyway, the point is, predictions very difficult, as we all know. Otherwise, as Cantonese, we say, 周知冇窮人, right? So, if 3 years ago I bought Zoom share, today I'll be giving you the Henry Yeung professorship to Hong Kong AGI, isn't it? Very difficult to predict. I can only say my hope. My hope is that there is no parallel, because first of all, it's fundamentally not efficient by definition. Second, more importantly, is that it's bad for human development, right? So of course, we hope the world to be conflict-free. We hope. In real life, not necessary, not so easy. So I do hope it won't end up that way. Now, realistically and empirically, I suspect it won't end up that way. Why? Because maybe apart from the most sensitive technologies, there are many other arenas. I think there are still sufficient channels for collaboration and technological development. As I said earlier, a lot of high-tech workforce in Silicon Valley came from Asia, many from mainland China, for example. And of course, there are many Americans who work in China, right? And so on and so forth. So in terms of the actual specific cases of the company, every equipment maker in the US is lobbying, hey, don't do this. I mean, Lam Research, Applied Material will lose hundreds of millions. They can't sell the machines in China, right? So on and so forth. So I really hope the scenario you outlined doesn't get materialized in at least in my lifespan, hopefully. Yeah. So thank you. Before we have the question, can I have a selfie with all of you? Just for fun. And okay, I will have all of us in, and then we power in. Okay, everybody ready? Go. Yeah, okay. Now, Q&A. Is it about the selfie? No.
Thank you so much for an excellent lecture. I'm a postdoc fellow here at the Department of Geography, and I'd like to ask 2 questions. So the first question is about let's get scale down a little. So there are a lot of the dynamics associated with the state's rescaling, and we can see the relocation of the manufacturing of the chips from the previously first-tier city or coastal cities to mainland in China for one case. And for the U.S., we can see the designation of Arizona as the location of the chip plant, which does not make the best sense in terms of the resources there. So how does the subnational dynamics influence the configuration of the global production networks? That is my first question. And the second question is more about the methodology. So I read a very inspiring methodology paper written by you in EPA. You said the distinction between the process and mechanism. And obviously the global network, the production network is a mechanism theory when you think the causal relationship between independent and dependent variables. So can we also use this theory as a process from a process perspective to see how this theory can inform the observation of the changes or shifts among the landscape of the supply chain? Thank you so much.
Thank you. There are 2 questions. Part 2, a second question to those of you less familiar with the discipline where both of us came from. It's a bit complicated. I will try to be brief. Let me deal with the first one. The subnational, if you like, policies and impact on restructuring of production chains and value chain. For example, river upgrading, right, pushing out the low labor intensive to the western part of China, so on and so forth. So generally speaking, there are always subnational variations, whether in the US or in China. Singapore, there is no subnational variation because we are just a little city, right? And a country at the same time. So don't talk about subnational. It's a waste of your time, all right? But if you talk about Malaysia, there are significant subnational variations. Different states will have different economic outcomes depending on the initiatives, endowment and resources. So in the case of, for example, semiconductors you mentioned, so Arizona shouldn't be hosting chips because it's a bit short of water. You need a lot of water to make chips, right? Because each wafer takes 600 to 800 processes, all right? And hence a lot of washing needed. So, but that the Taiwan, as you know, also had droughts. How the hell can they make more chips? Singapore, we have to even drink our own urine, right? Even known as new water. Right? And yet, we host, how much? We host about 10% of the world's semiconductor chip making. It's possible. So in short, it's not just a matter of natural endowment per se. There are ways, technologies to overcome some of those constraints. It's not ideal. So it's true that economic activities are not always located in the most environmentally ideal location. That's true. Right? Earthquake, for example, shouldn't happen. There is one problem. So, for example, why is it that India doesn't have wafer fabrication? Why? You have thought, well, India has so much software development capabilities, right? Yeah, so many CEOs in Silicon Valley are Indian origin. So there is no expertise trouble. There is no lack of a connection to the software industry. Why is it that there is no semiconductor manufacturing in India? Because infrastructure is not good. The electricity supply is not stable. Every trip in power, whole batch wafer gone. Each one $10,000. Can you imagine that? Right? So the electricity stability, water supply, so many of these basic things are critical in wafer fabrication. And yet governments or local regional governments can do certain things to make this work. So in that sense, there are subnational government initiatives that can help overcome those natural challenges. I think in the case of Arizona, it's also to do with land. You need very large land and subsidy. I think even within the US, different states competing very heavily against each other. Right? So why couldn't they? Automotive went to Alabama, for example, right? So good old days, Ohio chased very hard Japanese automakers, right? So this will always happen. It's not unusual. The second question is to do it the paper that I wrote, which is too boring for the rest of you. Essentially, is to say this GPN theory I'm proposing, the causal mechanisms, and can we think of the stuff we are discussing, technological shift, geopolitical context, as what we call different processes at work? The short answer is yes, it can be done that way. Yeah. So these are broad processes, but to understand processes, you then need to understand the underlying mechanisms at work. So the two we use together. It's not using one cannot use the other. It's to use the two together and understand the difference. That's my advice to you. Yeah. Great, thank you very much. Yeah.
Great. I think it's about time to conclude. Maybe one very short question if some of you have an urgent one to ask.
Yeah. A few more hours before I'm not allowed to board my plane, so hopefully let me go back home safely tonight.
Okay,
Yeah, this is the second time I listened to your lecture. Last week I went to BU to listen to your lecture in the BU, in the social science department.
Oh yeah.
Just now when you talk about the Singapore industrial policies, for example, you talk about in pharmaceutical industry, the policy is quite successful, but in biomedical industry, maybe less successful.
Yeah.
Can you talk more about this?
Oh,
Thank you.
That's actually my follow-up question.
I see. Okay. So in our case, life sciences, the biggest difference is there, right? Life sciences, we have spent a long time attracting what we call the big whales. Big whales in the life science industry, the big star researchers, big labs, millions and millions of dollars invested in those initiatives. Theoretically, it will produce some tangible outcomes, right? Which theoretically, I use the word theoretically intentionally, right? Theoretically translate into commercializable products or services. Treatment will be considered services, drugs will be considered products. The question is, have we seen the latter? Not so much. So there is a lot of research done. There are many teams, yes, many papers in Nature and Science published. No Nobel Prize given as of today, right? And no big product coming out. I mean, how can you say that it's very successful, right? Come on. So it's okay, I would say, but not. I would put it as okay, but not great. As you typically assess some of your colleagues, okay, but not great.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. That is the most entertaining your talk. The last 75 minutes is amazing. We went through around the world. Semiconductor is an industry that I am constantly puzzled about, and you help us to understand both the basic science as well as the business arrangement of the industry. But I guess the last slide really summarizes your talk very well, right? I mean, despite geopolitics that we think about and talk about every day, and we saw them on news every day, we know the business sector still has a lot of rationality. Money talks. We know building resilience is very costly. So at the end of the day, it's true that everyone is buying insurance, trying to make the supply chains more resilient and robust. But at the end of the day, as long as there's some rationality in the business sector, in the market, I think we're still fine. I like your comment that empirically we don't see, at least in this sector, technological decoupling yet. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.